Hey guys, welcome back to RHR Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Honk honk, everyone. Guys, today you notice we're talking Jen's sense of grievance, and we couldn't talk grievances without talking John Witherspoon. Hello. That's
Hi,
my
Jen.
How are you doing, John?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. So, why have I brought you in today, John, besides to continue to, I don't know, mock and torment you as per usual? Why have I brought you in today?
There might be
Because
some legal activity today to discuss.
there might be. So, guys, I know you know, but in case you don't know, and we will talk about this interview, but we got some news on Harry. That's right. Prince Harry loses his Court of Appeal challenge. John, as I always say, John doesn't have a channel. We're working on that, hopefully, but definitely give him a follow on Instagram. But John, tell us, what are your immediate thoughts hearing that Harry has lost his Court of Appeals challenge? And can you remind everybody just in a nutshell what this was about?
Sure. Well, the original issue that Harry had stuck in between his toes was that when he decamped from the UK for California, there was a decision or there was some calculation made about what type of security the UK government would provide to him because he was no longer a senior working royal. He and Meghan both stepped back and moved to the United States. So the committee that decides these types of things, which is called RAVIC, and it's the basically Committee on Executive and VIP Security, which makes a determination about apparently a lot of senior officials in the British government and what level of protection they're deemed to need. They decided that he would no longer benefit from full-time protection paid for by the British government. And what they said was that when Harry wanted to return to the UK, that he would only need to provide 28 days advance notice, at which point they would put together a so-called bespoke package, bespoke meaning customized package of security for him when he came back into the country. Well, he did not care for that for a variety of reasons, some of which are legal, I guess you could say, in nature, and some of which I think, and I'm just speculating, some of which had to do with his view of himself and the risk that he faced and those types of things. And so he did not care for the arrangement that was set up for him by RAVIC. So he became the first royal in, I think, decades and decades and decades to actually commence litigation against the UK government. And I think there are a lot of arguments that could be made about the propriety of that, because it certainly doesn't look very good for a member of the royal family to be suing the British government, but that's neither here nor there for purposes of this conversation. So he went to court and he lost. He was complaining that he deserved to have the same level of protection for all intents and purposes that other people had. I think in particular his brother. He was upset that he didn't get the same protection that his brother did. And the lower court said, no, we don't agree with you. So he lost. And I think it was widely viewed that he would not have success at the appellate court level, but that was not persuasive to him. So he told his lawyers to launch an appeal, which was in the Court of Appeal. And instead of a single judge, it is a 3-judge panel at the appellate court level. There were oral arguments, and paperwork was filed about a month ago. And then what I think is widely viewed to be a very quick turnaround, the 3 judges rendered an opinion. Apparently, they all 3 agreed. There was not a dissent. It was 3-0. And they basically all said that they did not feel he was entitled to relief at the appellate court level as well.
That's funny.
So that's where things stand as of today, as far as the courts are concerned. And there were some interesting comments that the judge made, unlike in the United States, where the opinions are released on paper or on the internet, on the web, the court website. In the UK, the judges actually come back into the courtroom and they provide a summary of what their ruling was, which was televised earlier today. And then they sort of admonish everybody, look, don't take this as the absolute gospel, because we're going to release a written opinion. And that followed very closely after the judge made his remarks. But again, the ration, he provided some overview, basically the general rationale that he had followed and that the other judges agreed with. And so that's kind of the end of it for the time being, hopefully forever, but you never know.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall when those three judges were in the room together talking through this stuff with Harry.
Yeah,
that would have been so interesting to me. But it brings up this, one of my
they weren't talking about it with Harry. They were just
I meant about Harry. Yeah,
about Harry. Yes. Right.
It just would have been funny to hear, like, this entitled prick thinks that, they probably don't talk like that. But I just, in my head, they'd been just laughing the whole time. Like, how long do we have to wait till we go back out there and say no?
Right. Well, it was a remarkably quick turnaround. Certainly very quick by United States standards, but apparently also very quick even by the UK standards. I don't know what the typical turnaround time on these types of things is in the UK, but heard several people say that it was very, very quick.
Oh, interesting. Huh. I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. Then we got one of my favorite quotes that came out of this that says, Judge Sir Geoffrey Voss says, the prince's team had presented powerful and moving arguments, but he could not say that the Duke's sense of grievance translated into an legal argument. What are your thoughts on that? I find it so funny when Harry goes into court because, that seems to be the case.
I think that's epic.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is because if you really want to parse that out and put it into layman's terms, basically what the judge has said is your feelings do not override facts, or your feelings are not sufficient to override the law. And that's a lost concept. There's so many cases I'm not talking about legal cases, but so many instances in this day and age where people say, I have to be right because my feelings tell me that I'm right.
Right.
And that is just not the way the world works. It is certainly not the way the law works. Mm-hmm. You can't just walk into court and say, I really feel strongly about this and therefore I should win. And basically what the judge said was, well, you need to go find another corner to cry in, because this one in the appeals court, in the royal courts, is not a place where you're going to get sympathy sufficient to move the dial in your particular case. I mean, the judge, I think, actually was probably kinder than he might ultimately have been by saying, you really tried hard. You get an A for effort, buddy. But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, we got to look at what's written in the law here. Mm-hmm. And what's written in the law is what we have to go by it when all is said and done. And sorry you feel bad, but we got to do what we got to do. Mm-hmm. And we can get into some of the other, into some of Harry's reaction and so forth. I know you've got a couple of clips, but the Harry's reaction, and in a lot of ways, the arguments that his lawyer put forward, I think are very, very closely related. They're very similar because, again, it's all based on, well, you don't understand, and my heart tells me, and my feelings tell me, and I didn't get as many sausages as my brother did, and I've been persecuted. And, one of the angles on this too, and I know, Jen, you and I have talked about this in the past. Mm-hmm. he's a victim. If he's a victim of anything, he is a victim of his own actions and lack of good judgment.
Yeah.
The Taliban, they're out to get me, the this, the that, I've got a target on my back. Well, you wrote a book, buddy, that said how many of these guys, I'm no fan of the Taliban, don't get me wrong, but if I read in a book that, somebody had deliberately basically bragged about something that I had done, I would be a little bit feeling animosity toward that person too. So Harry's trying to complain that he's a victim and that he's at risk, but he's at risk because of his own actions.
That's right.
And yes, it's commendable that he served in the armed forces in a combat zone, but your sympathy for him goes out the window when you realize the next step that he took about putting it in the book. It's Jen, as I explained to you earlier today, it's like if you loaned money or if you borrowed money from organized crime, and then you didn't pay it back, and the mob or the mafia or the organized crime boss just said, "I'm coming after you because you didn't give me back our money." Well, whose fault is that? Is that organized crime? So I'm not supporting organized crime, don't get me wrong. But is that the fault of the mobsters, or is it your fault?
It's the electric company for demanding money every month. You know what I mean? Like it's anybody else's fault but his.
Yes, the outrage. The power company wants money. Exactly. Otherwise, they're going to turn the electricity off. You have no lights. Whose fault is, the power company? Oh, they're so mean. They charge too much. I don't feel like I should have to pay my electric bill.
You're exactly right. Okay, so now that he has lost this appeal, what's the next step that he could take if he decides to do so? Is there, can he appeal with some sort of Supreme Court? Can you talk me through that?
Sure. Well, the British system is similar to the American system. Or maybe I should say the American system's similar to the British system, since the British system was around a little bit before. But basically, he filed a case at the lowest level court, and then he lost there. And now he appealed to the appellate court, which is the 3-judge panel, and he's lost there. That appeal is what they call an appeal as a matter of right. You lose, you can appeal, you pay the money, you file the paperwork, boom, your appeal is going to be heard. However, to get from the appellate court to the Supreme Court, it's a whole different set of circumstances. That is not an appeal as a matter of right. You have to ask permission of the Supreme Court to have your case heard. That's a really big ask. There are a lot of people, at least in the United States, who try to get into the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, no, we're just not interested in hearing your story. The reason is because obviously you're talking about a triangle and you're filtering up and filtering up. So if everybody got to go to the Supreme Court, it would be absolutely overwhelming. So the way it works is that they decide, at least in the United States, and I'm assuming this is the way it works in the UK as well, they decide among themselves what they consider to be an interesting enough case for them to hear. And when I say interesting, it's not just, oh, this would be kind of cool. It's something of substantial legal significance. In other words, there's a major question about the law that there's great confusion. Something definitely needs to be cleared up in the law, or it is a substantial question of social relevance. And in the United States, that would be something like abortion or gun control or a First Amendment question of some sort. Or basically, it's a constitutional question, a question about how the police behaved in a traffic stop and whether the Supreme Court says, you know what, we have a problem with this behavior relative to the United States Constitution. So quite honestly, I don't have very much hope at all that the UK Supreme Court would be interested in hearing from Harry, because it doesn't matter that much. It's not a grand legal question. It's just a basic question of interpretation of the law and of the ability of Ravik, for instance, to apply the law to someone like Harry. And above and beyond that, it's just a question of, okay, well, did Ravik follow their own rules and procedures? And apparently the lower court judge and now the appellate court judges have all said, we just don't find anything here that's sufficient to say that this decision should go in Harry's favor. We're going to vote to decide this in favor of Ravik and the UK government.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I would think, again, as you pointed out, they came back rather quickly. It sounds like not really hesitating on their decision. So I would think, it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't sound like he'd have much of a shot, but it'll be funny to watch him try because he will.
Yeah.
He's probably
Well, you never know. You never know. I mean, Harry's legal bills have to be astronomical at this point.
Absolutely.
And there's a possibility that he could be on the hook for some of the UK government's legal bills as well. And I'm not equipped to really address the nuances of how that might work. But he's got a substantial bill that he's got to pay regardless. And for him to then turn around and say, oh, you know what? I want to roll the dice again. I want to try to get into the Supreme Court. Even the very act of preparing a request to be heard by the Supreme Court is going to be tremendously expensive, and he may or may not want to spend the money on that.
Yeah. So again, I know the UK is different, but pretend that they're here in America, and he was going through this process. Would he have been on the hook for the other side at that point, having lost this part right here?
No, the United States, the system is just each side pays their own bills, and regardless of how the outcome turns out, you're not on the hook for the other side's legal fees. There are certain very, very limited exceptions to that involving sanctions. In other words, if there's been some sort of misconduct by one of the sides, and a judge has to be very upset, and there has to be very substantial and strong evidence of something that really was a dirty trick, then the judge can say, conceivably, I've got a real problem with this, and you've wasted these people's time and money, and I'm going to try and fix that. But for the most part, in the United States, you're not ever going to find yourself on the hook for the other team's legal expenses. There are some people who feel like that ought to be something that's adopted into the U.S. system. I don't think it's likely that that's ever going to happen.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I just wondered. Yeah, I was just thinking about that. That would be extra funny to me if the judge came back and said, Harry, you've wasted this court time multiple times. This is on you now.
Right.
Like, we're done with this. You're done.
Yeah.
So, but no, I'm sure that won't be the case. And then, so going to the financial, I guess you pretty much answered it there. Were there any other, he's got to owe these people just so much money. I was trying to think if there were any other aspects to the financial part of it, because I got to figure it's just hemorrhaging right now. Absolutely hemorrhaging out of him.
Yeah, it's got to be tremendously expensive. I mean, if this was in the United States and you were talking about an appellate attorney, appellate legal work in the United States, especially at the federal court level, is typically handled by a boutique set of lawyers. In other words, when you go from the district in the United States, when you go from the district court level to the appeals court level, in a lot of cases, you bring on a different legal team, because the nuances of trying to appeal a case in the federal courts are so specific that a lawyer who handles most of his cases at the district court level might be a great lawyer, but it's very specialized work at the appellate level. And then there's a whole nother crop of lawyers that typically get involved at the Supreme Court level. There are some go-to people, and there's only a handful of them in the United States who typically would be contacted to argue a case in front of the Supreme Court. Very, very, very specialized. And you obviously have to be incredibly smart and incredibly quick on your feet because you're answering these rapid fire questions. And it just gets more and more complicated the higher you go up the ladder.
I'm sure, because you're re-arguing for pieces and trying to make new points that,
Well, and actually, that's an important point to make as well. And you're not really trying to make new points. At least in the United States, there's a very, very strong precedent as far as the courts are concerned that when an appellate court decides a case that has been appealed from the lower court or the district court level, you cannot introduce new evidence. The appellate court decides the case based on the record that has been established at the lower court. And in a lot of cases, you'll actually see lawyers trying to make sure that they include everything they possibly can so that in the event that an appeal is going to be needed, they have all of these extra facts on the record that they can then go point to. So when you go to the appellate court level in the United States, you get the record, the written record, the transcript from the lower court. And then when you go in for oral arguments and the judges basically sit there and they say to you, okay, well, on page 6, you said such and such. And then on page 10, you said such and such. And those two ideas don't seem to, they seem inconsistent. Help me understand that. So that's the kind of experience that you have at the appellate court level. And then, as I said, when you get to the Supreme Court level, at least in the United States, you've got 9 really smart judges, justices, rapid firing questions at you. And you talk about whiplash. I mean, somebody might ask a question, somebody else might butt in and ask you to go in a completely different direction. It's very chaotic and it can be very nerve-wracking. And that's why it's a very specialized field for lawyers.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So Harry is not your client. You're not giving legal advice, but in hypothetical land, if Harry was your client right now, what would you tell him to do? Just calm down, buddy.
Well, we've talked about some of this. Yeah, we've talked about this before in some issues dealing with Harry and Meghan. As we've talked about, a lawyer has a responsibility to be a zealous advocate for his or her client. And I think everybody's comfortable with that. At the same time, there is a hand-holding, or I don't want to say therapeutic, but to a certain extent that is kind of the right word, a counseling, a guidance, a big brother or big sister type of component that comes into play at this point. So I'm sure, for instance, at the district court level, Harry's lawyers probably sat down with him and had a very long, drawn-out discussion about their professional opinion of why Harry lost, what his odds of success would be at the appellate level. What was this? Does the lawyer think, okay, well, this is like a 51-49 kind of decision, or was this a 80-20 kind of a decision? I'm guessing that Harry's lawyers probably said to him, you know what, you just lost this 80-20. You got 20, and the other guys had, the British government lawyers, they got 80. So you need to think really carefully about that before you decide you want to appeal to the next level. Harry, apparently, we have no idea, but he seems to have very large amounts of money at his disposal. Somebody with those kind of assets and those kind of funds might choose to roll the dice. That might have factored into what he decided when he wanted to go to the appeals level, in spite of what his lawyer told him. He might have said money is no object, and he has said that in a number of instances when he has said, you know, it's the principle and I'm standing up for what's right and just and all of that kind of thing. And he might have taken his lawyer's advice, assuming he internalized it. That's another big issue. A lot of people are given great advice by their lawyers, and yet they don't internalize it, or they think that they're smarter. Oh, I'm trying to fight for truth, justice, and all of that other great stuff, and I'm trying to slay the dragon. But in the end, the lawyer has to do what the client wants to do. So the lawyer might roll his eyes and say, or her eyes and say, can't believe we're going to go ahead with this, but that's what he wants. So we're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. John, if I hire you as my attorney right now, you have to say Jen's the greatest. Is that what you're saying? I'm your client. That's what you have to do.
Yeah. Well, sadly, that's not going to work because I don't have a Florida license, and Florida throws up a lot of roadblocks because a lot of lawyers want to practice in Florida. And Florida, New York, and California, 3 states where if you want to be a carpetbagger and kind of wave in by bringing your license from wherever and saying, here I am, California, I want to transfer my license. And they say, no, thank you. We've got enough lawyers and we've got enough sunshine. Or in the case of New York State, we've got enough work to go around for our guys right now. So if you want to get in the pool, you're going to have to pay the freight to, get yourself in the, you're going to have to come in the hard way. There's not a lot of waving in Florida, New York, and California. So sorry to disappoint.
Now what am I going to do? All right. So actually, I have a visual to go with that. There you go. There's me. There's you.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. But I do. So this brings me, thank you for explaining this with the courts and all. This brings me to the next point, which is this. Immediately following, it sounds like Prince Harry went over to the BBC. Now, reminder, he's scared of the press, according to himself. It was every click of the camera. He went over to
the British press. It's the British press.
That's right. Those words he likes to throw around: massage, race, you name it. They're them. He went to those very ones. Did you have the misfortune of watching any of that interview?
I did. I saw pieces of it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Very unfortunate.
Yeah, exactly. So I can't help but bring up, and I know you're going to fight me on this. It's okay, but I can't help bring up what the day is. Today is Princess Charlotte's birthday. Happy birthday, Princess Charlotte. Today is Princess Charlotte's birthday, and Friday is. I'm assuming I'll post up on Friday. And I just can't help but wonder how much of this, obviously, I feel like he would have done this either way. He thinks he's the victim, trying to get his name out there. I'm aware of that. But I just wonder if there's not an extra, on his point or his part and Meghan's part to get this out there on the day. They like to try to overshadow children for no reason. But what are your thoughts, I don't know, in general on this sit down with the BBC? He seems terrified, doesn't he? I think the interviewer should be terrified.
Yeah. Well, I think you do make a good point. He could have done this interview today. He could have done it tomorrow. He could have done it on Monday of next week or whenever. Right. And yet he chose to get it right out there. And it's entirely conceivable that, yes, he did that because he knew that there would be a high-profile event in the British royal family with his niece having a birthday, and happy birthday to her. I think he probably also really wanted to get this interview out there to dilute the headlines, which I'm sure will be on all the front pages of the British papers tomorrow morning, about, Harry, guess what? Lost again. And then if some of that space on the front page can be taken up with, oh, and by the way, he also gave this interview to the BBC, and here's a picture, a still, and all that kind of thing. I suspect that that's also part of the equation for him.
Yeah, I wondered the same thing for sure. Now, somebody asked me such a great question. Shout out to Squeegee. Such a great question, which is, how could he must have known the judgment was coming down, because how could he do the BBC this quickly? I know we're just speculating. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, we are definitely just speculating. However, he knew the decision was coming at some point. And from what I understand, the first hint that the decision would be coming today was last night in the UK. Apparently, they uploaded today's proceedings on the docket, and people took note of that, and they knew that this was coming. So if Harry had made some pre-arrangements to be interviewed by the BBC, I suspect all the pieces were in place, and they just had to pull the trigger. And I wouldn't be surprised if first thing this morning a camera crew headed out from Los Angeles to Montecito to get everything all set up, so that at the appropriate time, when the decision was announced, they could immediately sit down with Harry and turn the lights on and the camera on and start to get his opinions and impressions of what had transpired, regardless of which way the case went.
Sure, that makes sense to me. Let's see. I was trying to think what else. Oh, there was a big point in this, and I've written it down. Hold on one second. I'm just trying to think of the takeaway, because the interview, it was mostly him just screaming, I think. But he talks about the part that I found particularly infuriating was speaking about how long does Charles have left. He's bringing this up and making himself the victim of this. I would say taking out his own accountability in all this. What are your thoughts in regard to this? How long does Charles have left in regard to he's afraid to go back to the UK is the way I'm understanding that.
Yes. Well, again, this kind of goes back to the softer side of lawyering, where I don't know. Yeah. I mean, and this is not even, this is just me sort of musing and talking. If I were his attorney, I would say to him, listen, not doing yourself any favors. You're your own worst enemy at this point. If you go on the BBC and say, oh my gosh, my father, he's in ill health and he's old and, you know, he could meet his demise at every day, at any point.
Right.
Harry's got the key to the dungeon that he has placed himself in.
That's true.
I would say to him, don't go on the television and make a fool of yourself with the BBC. Get on an airplane and go see your dad. He's your dad. And you've just completely undermined or you've made the argument about the importance of doing that. Mm-hmm. So grow up, get over yourself, and get over there on an airplane.
Yeah, I think so.
And ask that, you know, or start the 28-day clock right now. Say, I am coming 1 month from now. I will be there in the UK. I want to see my dad. And I'm sure that the British government would jump through hoops to make sure that happened. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I wanted to mention too about just his comments, I find it personally offensive as a so-called officer of the court, a member of the bar, when somebody like Harry loses twice, and then he comes out and says something along the lines of, this was an old-fashioned stitch-up or something like that. In other words, this was a fix. Yeah. I am personally offended by that as a member of the legal system, as a participant in the legal system. That is so offensive to most lawyers. And I'm sure Black Belt Barrister and everybody else would tell you the exact same thing. That kind of stuff is absolutely toxic and repulsive to claim, as he seems to have done, at least my opinion is that this is what he was doing, for him to claim that the legal system is fixed. That is really, really offensive to every lawyer that I know. It's just a really, really nasty and stupid thing to say. I can't put it in any other terms. Yes, there are judges who make mistakes and who do dumb things and who get themselves in trouble. And yes, we're all aware of that. However, when people do that, they are vigorously punished by a system. Incidentally, it's not the government that punishes people like that. It is the lawyer, it's the legal community in and of itself that punishes bad lawyers. and bad judges, because it is so important, the public trust and the trust between an attorney and a client. So for him to make those kind of comments, I think I've made myself clear. It is extremely off-putting to people like me and to everybody else who has a part in the legal system. And I guarantee, and the people, here's the other thing about it too. Most judges that sit, I don't know what the pay scale is in the UK, but in the United States, if you accept a position as a district court judge or a appeals court judge or even a Supreme Court judge, you're not doing it to get rich. I guarantee you that. You're doing it because you believe what you're doing is really, really important, and it is really, really important. It's the bedrock of, the society that we have. Yeah. It's one of the three branches of government in the United States. It is extremely important. I'm sure it's similarly important. It's viewed to be similarly important in the UK. So to denigrate that and claim that it is corrupted somehow and that it is, again, as he seems to have done, in my opinion, that is just really beyond the pale. It not only looks terrible, it offends people, and it's just downright dumb. It's just dumb.
It is just Harry and Meghan. This is their MO. This is what they do. If they don't immediately get their way, things aren't fair. Things aren't right. The system's broken. It's not that they're broken and that they're not arguing.
Well, and it shows their just general level of ignorance, and by which I mean it's their lack of practical knowledge, education, book knowledge. It's their lack of experiential knowledge from having existed in the world for 40 plus years. Yeah. And it's their lack of emotional maturity and emotional intelligence, as it's often called. Oh, I didn't get my way. I mean, it literally, what Harry said on the BBC, to me, my impression of it is it reeks of a 15-year-old who wrote a paper, did a lousy job of it, took it back to the teacher and said, you screwed me on this. You gave me a raw deal. And the teacher said, no, these are all the reasons why this is a raw deal. And then went and pouted and blamed the situation, the fact that he got a lousy grade on it, blamed that on the teacher and did not take responsibility for it himself. That's what it reminds me of.
I think you're right. Absolutely. But that's what we see from him time and time again. He's petulant. He's a child.
Yes,
he's
petulant is exactly
he acts like a child. Yeah. Please, yes. Go ahead. That's really, yeah.
Yeah. And somebody said, yes, the entitlement, as somebody said the other day, it seems very much like a form of some sort of arrested development. And I've made this point before too. Harry grew up in a severely compromised situation, set of circumstances, relative to where he is now placed in the world. Had he grown up outside of the British royal family, I suspect his worldview and his emotional intelligence that I just mentioned would be very, very different than what they are right now. And to their great credit, William and Catherine, Princess Catherine, seem to be making Herculean efforts to make sure that their kids really understand the common person, the average person. And I give them great credit for that. And I think Diana did the same thing. Diana certainly tried to do the same thing with William, and presumably she tried to do the same thing with Harry. But again, this notion of, again, a grown man complaining about what he was served for breakfast relative to one of his siblings. Oh, that's just bizarre. Again, you keep coming back. Thank God he wrote Spare. Thank God he wrote Spare. Can you imagine if we were all just wallowing around trying to put the pieces together and connect the dots in the absence of that book? And as I've said before, I think it speaks volumes about Meghan that she actually allowed that book to get out the door, because I guarantee you she read it at least once if not multiple times, when it was still a raw manuscript. And she let it get out the door. So I think it speaks as much about Meghan as it does for Harry.
I can't prove it. Is my opinion that she helped write it. That's just my opinion. I just don't think Harry thought to put in that William and Catherine love to watch Suits. Just saying. I think that was me too. But no, I agree with everything you're saying. I think they're awful. And I think anytime he shows himself in interviews like this and acts like this, I think we can see the awfulness. I think that was the big thing was just he was claiming, I guess that's it for going to the UK, basically. I forget how he worded it. He said he doesn't see a world. He doesn't see a world where he will bring his wife and children back to the UK at this point. Do you feel like, again, just asking for your opinion, not your legal advice, but your opinion on this? To me, I hear that, and I think he's I don't know what the word is, aligning with Meghan and another line in the sand for the royal family. That's how I'm taking it. What are your thoughts on that? I don't see. Yeah, go ahead.
I can see that being the case. I can. It'll be fascinating if he follows through on what is effectively at this point a threat never to go back to the UK.
Yeah.
And to blame it all on his father, this conspiracy that we're talking about, this stitch up that we were talking about a minute ago, he has effectively directly implicated King Charles in that by saying, well, if my dad really wanted to, he could make the pieces move around the chessboard and get this all taken care of in one fell swoop, but he refuses to do that. But I refuse to actually go see him because, I don't feel safe there. Won't it be interesting to see if Harry shows up at his dad's funeral when the time comes?
Yeah.
Won't that be fascinating?
Yes. I think it's disgusting for him to say this. I don't see a world where we're blah, blah. But then in the same breath, my dad might be going, basically something, things are very wrong with my dad. It's inevitable that at some point the king is going to pass away.
Right.
And,
I will never, my children will never see their grandfather again.
Right. Exactly.
And it's his fault. It's his fault.
His fault. That's right. Imagine, I think about Prince William a lot in situations like this, and how very different he turned out. Thank God he was born first, but also, how must he be feeling to hear his idiot brother? The idiot brother's constantly using his mom's name, Diana. Now he's bringing this up about dad. If you're there every day taking care of if you're helping take care of your parents, if a sibling decides to use dad's name while you're there, to quote Meghan, in the trenches with dad, I just think that would be infuriating.
You know what? I think you're right. But at the same time, I think it's a very much mixed blessing for William. And here's why. I think as you said, I think on the one hand, he's furious. On the other hand, I think he's saying to himself, every day that goes by, I feel more and more confident in the decision that, by all accounts, he's ultimately going to make to dispense with his brother and with Meghan by booting them permanently from the British royal family. So I think that William is probably furious on an increasing basis, but at the same time, he's like, thank you. You're solidifying what I've been thinking all along, and you're making it easier and easier for me to make that call when the time comes.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. Yep, that's a good point as well. Thank you. I guess as we wrap this up, any other thoughts on any of the stuff? Anything else on your mind?
I don't think so. I think there's going to be more commentary. It's going to be very interesting to watch the talking heads come out and do further analysis of this. And Harry may well give more interviews, and there's going to be commentary about this in the newspapers and so forth. And I suspect that a lot of what you're going to hear is along the lines of what we've talked about here today. He lost He refuses to internalize the loss. He refuses to take responsibility for the loss. And and in doing so, he's going to make himself increasingly dislikable. If he wants to play martyr for the rest of his life, he's going to have a really serious reckoning at some point in his life and say, people have already talked about him trying to get inside of his head and to say he's got to be thinking, what in the world have I done? People were looking at screen grabs from him in New York, getting out of the car and having Meghan barge in front of him to hug the woman, the PR person, whoever it was, and basically leaving him in the dust. Those little, I'd call them microaggressions or micro offenses. I'm not a big fan of that terminology, but I think there are just, it's kind of a death by 1,000 cuts type of a scenario. And I think that at some point he's going to have to decide what he wants to do with the rest of his life. My prediction is similar to what other people have said. I think he will end up going back to the UK, notwithstanding all the nonsense we heard today. But he at the same time, he did say also today, he misses the country, he misses the UK, he misses the culture, all these kinds of things. I don't doubt that at all. And he's going to just have to decide, am I going to eat some crow and say, you know what, all these specious arguments that I've been throwing out all along are not going to get in my way to go back to my home country? By the way, Jen, I'll just say one other thing. We were talking the other day, there's a really good movie that I like called The Good Shepherd, starring Robert De Niro. And there's one of the main characters is played by Billy Crudup, I believe is his name, how it's pronounced. And he is a British guy, and he ends up, it turns out in the end that he's a Russian spy, and he defects to Moscow, I believe. And at the very end of the movie, he ends up having a phone call where they recount, he and an American CIA officer played by Matt Damon, they have this phone call, and Matt Damon recalls a conversation that the two characters have had previously in the movie. And the previous conversation was that there's a discussion of what somebody's worst nightmare is. And the response to it is to be alone and without a country. Mm-hmm. And when Matt Damon and the guy in Moscow get on the phone, Matt Damon says to the British double agent in Moscow, your worst fear has come true. You're going to die alone without a country. And I'm sure, no secret where I'm going with this, direct parallel after, again, Harry said today, I miss my country, I miss this. He's going to be by himself in California without a country. Mm-hmm. He may already be there right now.
Yeah, I wonder that as well. What was the name of the movie sad. Again? You said Good Shepherd.
It's called The Good Shepherd with Robert De Niro. Very interesting movie for people who are interested in the spy world and intelligence. It basically tells the story of the way in which the CIA was founded. They recognized that there was a threat, that they needed an intelligence gathering organization that would consolidate all the intel that was coming in to the United States. And C in CIA obviously stands for Central, and they wanted to be able to amalgamate all of the information that was coming in. So it's available. You can watch it on Amazon Prime or wherever else. But yes, The Good Shepherd with Matt Damon, Robert De Niro, Angelina Jolie is in there, Billy Crudup is in there. A lot of very, very, very high profile actors. Very interesting movie.
Yeah,
I recommend it.
Yeah. Okay. And as we wrap this up, I just have two final thoughts for you. One, are you in the conservatory with a candlestick?
I am not. I am not.
I'm
in a
joking because last time.
secret, undisclosed location, as they say.
Oh, because last time we dressed alike, and actually the last 2 times we dressed alike. This time we did not. So I was teasing. You're Colonel Mustard, and I'm Miss Scarlet. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, I told you already. I wore this. This is my nod to Meghan's outfit in New York.
Okay. So our pants 12 sizes too big.
No, not that part of it. No, just the jacket.
Are we
and it is
Ralph Lauren?
It is a Ralph. Yes.
Okay.
A Ralph.
And
it's one of my favorite coats. And what about it?
A purple label? Is it a purple label?
It's not a purple. No, it's not a purple. Not a purple. Sorry.
That's all right. I wore a Lauren shirt the other day, and I thought, oh, you're going to be so disappointed because I think you called it the low tier.
Well, it is one of the lower tiers, and I actually should correct myself. Thanks for the opportunity. The lowest tier of Ralph Lauren is chaps.
Okay.
Yes, that's the lowest, and then Ralph Lauren is a little bit above that. In fact, I think this is a Lauren tie, a Lauren by Ralph Lauren tie.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not above wearing, like I think I said the last time we talked. I look at it, if my appreciation for the style and the fabric and everything exceeds whatever price is being charged, I'm good with it. I don't hesitate.
Yeah, absolutely. Or
if I had looked at this coat and said the price tag is $5,000, I would have declined. I don't care how nice the coat it is. So
you paid $4,990 is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. So
it is a very nice coat. It's not the coat I take issue with. It's the color that I take issue with.
I know. So you've told me.
It's almost, say it with me, beige. It's almost beige.
I know. It's dangerously close.
It is. Now, the final thought I would like to bring up is last time you were on, you showed us some very cool wildlife photography. And a lot of people said you should be a wildlife photographer. So in case you guys don't know, he has owls near him. What were you going to say? Yeah.
No, nothing. I said yes.
Owls near him. And so he's been photographing them. And maybe you could tell us, what were you asking this particular owl a question about Harry or something? I'll pop it up on screen.
Which owl is this? Go ahead and put it up there. Yes, I said to the owl, would you like to talk? Would you like to give me your thoughts on Harry and Meghan? And this is the response that I got.
Oh, that's actually such a cool picture, though. I love it. I think it's really neat.
It is a cool picture. And
tell me about it, and I'm going to see if I can find the last batch of pictures you take. I'd like to pull those back up if I can. Keep going.
Oh, well, this is just a picture of one of the owls that was hanging around, and it literally decided I was going to take its picture, and it literally turned its back on me. And I thought, okay, I'll fix you. I'll take a picture of your backside and put it on the internet, and then you can just deal with it. So anyway, yes, that owl made a deliberate slight to try to offend me, and I said, no, I'll get the last laugh. I'll take your picture.
Oh, I don't immediately have those photos. I'll see if I can. Maybe you can send them to me again or something, and I'll pop up on screen. But I just took you off. Hold on. There you are. I tried to take you down. Look at me being Meghan. I'm to take you off my screen. Hold on. There you are. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do some great photography. So these just happen to be, I'm not trying to dox you. They're just in your area and you're able to catch photos of them. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Where exactly do you live? So we can all go look at the app. Just kidding.
Oh, well, you know what? It's one of the great things about the Washington, D.C. area. We've obviously got the Potomac River running through the middle of the city. And the city is here because of the river. The cool thing about Washington, though, is that it is it's a city, but there's a tremendous area of the city that is protected and is there are islands in the river that are basically nature preserves. There's Rock Creek Park, which is it's like Central Park in New York, except it runs all the way up from the river through the middle of the city. And then there's the canal area next to the river. And all of that is very, very heavily wooded. And in fact, even downtown Washington, one thing that people always comment on is the number of trees that are in downtown DC and the number of parks and so forth. So relevance of all of this is that there's a tremendous amount of wildlife that regardless of where you go in the Washington area, you're going to find all kinds of things that you might not find in, say, New York City. And again, I don't want to get into an argument with New York people about, oh, well, we've got more than, that's not my intention. But there's a tremendous amount of wildlife in Washington: owls, hawks, deer, foxes, raccoons, you name it. You can look carefully and find wildlife pretty much everywhere you go. And again, it's because of the river. There are a lot of birds of prey that are attracted to the river because they're fishing there and all kinds of things. So there's a whole ecosystem that never really got disrupted in the way that it might have gotten disrupted in some other cities that have become very industrial around rivers. That's not the way Washington is.
That's cool. So hopefully you'll show it to us sometime when you start up your walking channel.
Yes, would like that.
That's very cool. Well, John, as always, thank you so much for coming on and for taking the time to break this all down for us. We appreciate that very much. How can we further support you? I know you're still kicking around the channel thing, but Instagram, is that the best way?
Sure. Instagram, Witherspoon DC is my account. And when I start my YouTube channel, I will make an announcement there. So that's a great way to sort of pre-order access to my YouTube channel. And I always appreciate, I always read through the comments. I always appreciate people invariably have very nice things to say. I appreciate it very much. And, at this point, if you want to support me, Jen, you've been so generous, and I know a lot of people watch your channel. They might not be subscribed, but I'll just echo what you've always said, that the subscriptions, the likes, the shares, the comments, all of those things trigger the YouTube algorithms. And so if people want to support me, they can do it indirectly by supporting you.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it really does help me out. I really push into that 200,000. So thank you. And you're right. All of those help. And if you don't know what to comment, just leave me a honk. I love those. So show me your honkers. You showed me yours with your mouth. There you go. Right. But John, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And as soon as you get that channel up, you let us know and we'll be flocking over there to support it. So
that would be great.
Yeah, and I'm sure as they do more crazy stuff, I'll be pestering to come back. And I will say, I've just recorded for my weight loss journey, and so I give you a shout out there because you've been very helpful, and thank you for that behind the scenes, just with some different administrative stuff. So thank you for that, and I look forward to maybe having you as a guest on that channel as well. That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great. I look forward to it. Yeah, for sure. Well, John, again, thank you for everything, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.